So I'm going to blow y'all landman watchers. I'm going to blow y'all's mind today. Today we're going to talk about Cushing, Oklahoma. Now, this is something y'all didn't learn by watching Landman, okay? This is not something that you learned by some Taylor Sheridan flick. This is real talk because most people who work in the oil and gas business out in the field, a lot of them have never even heard of Cushing, Oklahoma. And if they have, they couldn't tell you a damn thing about it. But see, Cushing, Oklahoma is a little town in north central Oklahoma that's very important to the oil and gas business and to the price of crude oil. Now, it's only a little town of about 7,000 people, and don't let that fool you. It definitely punches above its weight class on the global markets. Just because it's small doesn't mean it's not powerful. You see, Cushing, Oklahoma is known as the pipeline crossroads of the world, right? And for good reason, okay? It serves as the official delivery point for WTI, West Texas Intermediate. But not just that. This is where a lot of crude futures and stuff like that are determined. Now, while it's not, we'll get back to this, while the contracts aren't necessarily set in Cushing, Cushing is a big player in this. So see, the futures contracts are actually traded up in New York. A lot of y'all didn't know that, but that's the New York Mercantile Exchange, not Chicago. But they rely heavily on Cushing for this. I want you to think is Cushing, Oklahoma. I want you to think of it like a big bank for crude oil, okay, a vault, if you will. It's like a gigantic vault. So Cushing is this storage facility, right, that dates back to the early 1900s or so, right, when oil was first discovered there, I think in 1912 or something like that. Cushing became a major oil producing field. And because it was such a booming place at the time, it quickly caught the attention of a lot of people who were main players in the oil and gas industry. Now, through the production side of things, Cushing's local oil field kind of declined over the years, right? It became less important. But the location of Cushing remained extremely relevant. What makes this so relevant is it lies about equal distance between the Permian, the Bakken, and the mid-continent region, right? And this makes it ideal for pipeline connectivity. That's what makes this place so important. Now, over time, companies began building massive tank farms in Cushing. And they had pipelines coming in there. They had junctions built there. And today, I think over a dozen or so major pipelines converge there in Cushing. That means they come together there in Cushing. And that's what makes it the most interconnected oil hub in North America, if not one of the most interconnected ones in the world. So Cushing is one of the world's largest storage facilities, right? It holds something like 90 million barrels of crude oil each day. It's a lot of crude oil passes through there. And remember, I told you to think of Cushing, Oklahoma as a crude oil bank, because that's in essence what it is. Now, there are hundreds of above ground storage facilities there in Cushing. I mean, we're talking each one of them has 350,000 barrel capacity all the way up to, I think, 570 or 600,000 barrels each. These are some massive storage facilities there in Cushing. If you look, you can see them on satellite images, and these things are really impressive. They're these massive circular white structures that are really clustered together. That storage capacity is what makes Cushing so important. Now, there's inbound pipelines that come there, like the Permian Basin in Texas and New Mexico. It comes in there. The Bakken Shale in North Dakota. Crude comes in from there all the time. You have the DJ Basin up in Colorado. Crude comes in from there all the time into Cushing, and even from Canada via the Keystone, right? Now, a lot of y'all are going to have opinions on the Keystone one way or another, but that's what makes Cushing so important. All of these pipelines converge in there. But also what makes Cushing so important is they have a lot of outbound connectivity, going to places like Port Arthur, Houston, Corpus, a lot of intermediate ports throughout there. This is where America's oil comes together. So there's a lot of major players there in Cushing, Oklahoma. Companies like Enbridge and Energy Transfer Partners, Magellan Midstream. These are all, TC has one there. They're the Keystone operator, right? These players are in Cushing for a reason. Every single one of these companies that I just mentioned, like Enbridge, for instance, right, or TC or Energy Partners, whoever, they operate pipelines and operate facilities there in Cushing because they manage individual tank farms, and they manage these pipeline connections that are there. These things are really important, and what they do also is they lease space, and this is another really important component to this. So it's not just this handful of companies, you see. It's a lot more smaller, minute players come in to play the game in Cushing. I remember I told you to think of Cushing like a vault or like a bank, right? A clearinghouse, something like that, right? Oil producers deposit oil, barrels of oil, they're into Cushing. Buyers like refiners, traders like myself, exporters, things like that, we withdraw them kind of based on our needs or on future contracts, right? That's what we do. So everything, my day starts off with looking at Cushing. Now, here's something you probably need to understand. Cushing is the settlement point for the contract, okay? For West Texas Intermediate, WTI contract. Cushing is the settlement point for that. Even though it's traded up on the New York Merc, they're coming back to Cushing to get settled. So when inventories are high at Cushing, right? And we're talking millions and millions of barrels of oil a day, right? Billions. Really. When Cushing has high levels, this signals what we call an oversupply in the market. This is why the daily capacity, the weekly capacity, the monthly capacity, the quarter capacity at Cushing is so very important to people like myself. So when oil capacities are high, this signals an oversupply. Oversupply means lower prices for oil. This is what happens when the market gets flooded. So when I tell you about oil, this is what I'm talking about. When I talk about an oversupply, when I talk about flooding the market, I'm specifically talking most of the time about Cushing. Now, what happens when inventories at Cushing are low? Well, that can signal a tight market, okay? Where high signals a different market, low signals a very tight market. Low markets drive up prices. If you're a producer, you love a tight market. You love it when the capacity at Cushing is low. Think about that. I'm just letting you in on the inside baseball. So high capacity means lower prices. Low capacity means higher prices. That's simple. And just so you know, this is why the EIA, the Energy Information Agency, this is why they report on a weekly basis Cushing's average supply at their storage level. And right. Trust me, analysts watch this, traders watch this, policymakers watch this, people all along the oil supply chain watch this. Cushing is a very big player. Now you're probably thinking, Matt, why in the hell are you talking about Cushing, Oklahoma and this storage? And what does it matter? What is the global implications of little old Cushing, Oklahoma? Well, be quiet, I'm going to tell you. So alongside Brent crude, WTI is one of the global benchmarks of oil. And Cushing's infrastructure doesn't just affect local or regional economies, not by far. Cushing, little old Cushing, Oklahoma, right here in the center of America, affects the international market as a whole. Now listen, even though most of the oil isn't physically settled there at Cushing, the symbolic power of WTI means that hedging, pricing, contract structuring, all this stuff takes its cues from what's happening at little old Cushing, Oklahoma. Little old Cushing, Oklahoma, it's a rare example of how a small U.S. town can wield so much global power. If you want to think of American small town rural power, look at Cushing, Oklahoma. Old Cushing, it's made history a few times, like in 2020, April of 2020, during the early stages of the COVID pandemic, you know. WTI futures, they were trading at like 37, what did we get down to? $37 a barrel, something like that. We got down to about $37 a barrel because capacity at Cushing was nearly full. Now that was made worse by OPEC kind of flooding the market. And listen to me, when this happened, physical buyers didn't have a place to put the oil because the bank was full. They didn't have a physical place to put the oil that we actually bought and we contracted for. I want you to let that sink in. Traders had to pay people to store oil. It's that simple. I mean, hell, I remember we putting it on ships and throwing it out in the Gulf, you know? I mean, we were just putting this shit everywhere, you know? When Cushing's oil gets full, when their capacity gets full, we have a problem. Now, as this is adapted, as the oil production in the U.S. has grown, Cushing's infrastructure has had to adapt rather rapidly. Unfortunately, it hasn't adapted rapidly enough for all this drill, baby, drill. One of the bad things about this is we're going to drill, baby, drill, and we ain't going to have enough places to put oil. Hence why we're seeing oil go down. The relevance of Cushing, it's going to stay relevant for quite a while because there's no real reasonable alternative yet to oil. It's true. For the foreseeable future, Cushing is going to be a stable place to store our oil. So Cushing may not be a place that you've ever heard of unless you're in the bowels of trading and all that, but trust me, it's the backbone of America's energy logistics. Cushing is a really important place when you talk to people like me. Cushing reminds us that commodities, whether it's oil, gas, electricity, or hell, even water, they're far more than just products that we consume. They're far more than just consumables. These are systems with choke points, with problems and hubs that shape entire economies. So the next time you see the price at the pump, I want you to think about those massive tanks in Cushing, Oklahoma. And they're quietly holding that black gold. They're quietly holding it that powers your home, powers your car, powers your economy. And little old Cushing, Oklahoma, believe it or not, if you work in the patch, it controls your job. So think about Cushing, Oklahoma. It's a really important place. You didn't learn that from Landman, did you?